Hey, welcome to JG3 Reviews. My name is James and I review fountain pens and some other pens, although I'm just now getting around to that. And I'm going to be doing paper and ink and all that good stuff. So today is the day that we actually start moving into some of those areas. And I decided as long as we're going to do something, I'm doing this a lot, talking with my hands. As long as we're going to do something different, we might as well go very different, at least very different for anything that I've ever used as a pen. It's kind of funny when people find out that you use fountain pens. For some reason, the uninitiated think that you're talking about feathers from turkey butts, and I don't know why everybody thinks that. That's so weird. I've never done that in my life, and I don't know why I would, Constitution or not. So this is almost as weird as that, I guess, to some people. And honestly, I always looked over it. A glass dip pen. I've never had a reason to need them. I've never wanted one. I've never looked at that and thought I could use that until here recently. I've always thought some of them were actually kind of odd looking, just kind of over the top. But do they have a purpose? Yeah, I think they do. So I'm going to start getting into some ink reviews, and we're going to do that today. And I wanted to use the same pen for the different ink reviews because that way you get some consistency in the test bed, so to speak. So I wanted a certain kind of paper, a certain pen that I use every single time so that you get a fairer comparison and impression. So with that said, I thought, what about a glass dip pen? They're easy to clean, so the low maintenance would be awesome. I don't want to clean a fountain pen and have to flush it out every single time I am trying a different sample. This is so easy to use. You can do several samples in like 5 minutes and have it clean between each one. So that caught my eye, and I thought, I think I got to get me one of those. So I went with the plainest one, like the Chrysler K-Car Toyota Corolla of glass pens. This is known as the glass dip pen. I think that's all the name, really, the glass dip pen. And so I picked it up for $5 off of Amazon, and I'm going to use this to test my inks. And being an inexpensive and simple and plain glass pen, since I talk with my hands a whole lot, there's a good possibility that even during this one, it could go flying across the room. In fact, it kind of just tried to slip out of my hand just then. So a cheap one was also part of the deal. So we're going to flip the camera, we're going to look at the glass dip pen, and then we will try out the Monteverde brown sugar. And I'll explain a little bit more about that when we get to the ink. Okay, so let's take a look at the glass dip pen. It has a glass, we're going to call this a nib, a glass nib. The swirl pattern is actually what those channels are what hold the ink and allow it to flow down very simply to the writing tip. This is the glass black barrel, and there you go. That's the pen. There is just not a lot to talk about with this particular pen. And when I bought a plain one, Just not much there. But it is actually, I will say this, these channels hold more ink than I expected, and so I find it handier than expected that way. Another thing I noticed was, certainly on a small sheet of paper like this Rhodia dot pad here, you can write that whole page, I think, without having to dip again. So it really goes a long ways, and it writes better than probably I would have expected. I don't know what anybody else's expectation would have been, but it's pretty good. I'll say more about that as we get into the ink test, I guess. But let's talk about the ink. This is Monteverde's brown sugar ink, and this was recommended by a couple of different viewers of the channel when I brought up that I was looking for a nice brown ink to match that Hongdian Black Forest pen. And if you're wondering what I'm talking about, go check out that review. I'll put a link up above. But I really love that pen, and in fact, it has this ink in it right now, and I'll jump to the end and tell you this, it is a great match for that pen, and it writes well in that pen. But this is one of a few inks that I've got right now, and I'm looking at maybe 3 or 4 in my search for a kind of a favorite brown. I really think, this is just my own personal opinion, I really think that brown is an underappreciated ink color. I think it's great, and if you get the right shade, I don't think it's a problem for certain jobs. I mean, there are certain jobs that it's black or blue, and maybe even just black or blue. But in what I do, I write a lot of notes and outlines and things like that, and I do those things by hand because it helps my memory, and so I can kind of pick inks that I enjoy. But a good brown ink, I think, is underappreciated. Another ink that I'm on a quest for, there are actually a couple of basic colors that I like different things. I'm always up for a new blue, but green, I don't think there's enough green ink in the world. You may have heard me say that before. And I'm not sure that there is anywhere near enough of a good dark, like an imperial purple. And so I've got a few of those to try out too. So, and that's also the high school colors here. And so that also is handy to have an ink in the school colors now and then. So let's go ahead and dive into, and this is a bit of an uncharted thing for me, so this might seem a little bit clunky today. That's all right. Let's dive into the ink review and the pen. We'll do them both at the same time. As I said, this actually holds more ink, maybe even than I want to get today, but it does a good job of holding quite a bit. Just kind of get the little excess off there. And it doesn't look maybe like there's that much ink there that you could write with, but it's better than you think. I meant to tell you, this is a change as well, and in all these ink reviews, I'm going to use the Rhodia dot pad, and I'm going to do that because it is an ink that is fairly common, and a lot of you already have this, and you don't have what I normally use maybe, and so this will allow you to kind of know that it's going to perform similarly on your paper. Okay, so this is, and I don't know what to call this pen. I'm going to call it the $5 glass dip pen. Now, one thing I like about it, I'll tell you this, it actually is quite smooth. I mean, I have fountain pens that don't write as smoothly as this dip pen. Now, if you were, I don't have a good lens for this to show you, but if you look closely at these, you'll notice that a lot of times when they're brand new, the writing tip can be a little bit rough, but that smooths out with use. And you notice already, this is a good dark brown. This is the Monteverde. I'm going to sit here and talk so much that's going to dry out or something. I guess that would be part of the test, wouldn't it? And this is the brown sugar ink. And like I said, as far as the pen itself, I guess we'll go ahead and do a little bit of the normal stuff, just to give you an idea of how this does. I've been pleasantly surprised. I didn't have high expectations for such a cheap glass pen. I was kind of taking a chance, and it actually does quite well. Okay, so there a little bit, maybe I'm ready to dip again. When it gets just a little bit low, just sometimes it'll, you can wait, and the ink will make its way down if you've been writing too fast. But you can also just dip it again. So there is that. See, so as far as the pen, that's probably as much as I'll test the pen for you here. You get the idea. It actually is, it's a decent writing pen. So, you know, if you've got a case for one of these, or if you want to get one to do samples for yourself, you know, the pen, I would recommend. I like it. Let me get just a little bit more on there, just in case. Now let's see here. I know, let's do a little bit of timing. I have an iPad here to off camera just so I can give you an idea of how quickly it dries. Okay, so maybe let's do this. How many? 20? Let's do 20. And we'll do 30 seconds, okay? So this is going to be how quickly it dries. 5 seconds. 10 seconds. 20 seconds, if I looked at that right. It's possible that I might have messed that up. and maybe I did. I think that's got to have been 30 seconds. So a little bit over 30 seconds, and it's going to be dry. Tell you what, let's do. Let me dip that again, and let me do one of these. Let's see. Let's give that 30 seconds, and we'll see how that goes. While we're waiting for 30 seconds to pass by, let me do a little bit more writing here. No use just sitting and staring, right? I don't know whether I'm printing or doing cursive, but we'll stick with the print. How about that? Hi. Okay, so that's 30 seconds. And just pay attention to the number sign. So it's going to take a little longer than 30 seconds. Of course, that was right after a fresh dip. This might not have been. So and paper is going to vary. And that's one thing about, say, this paper compared to the one that I normally use is not going to dry quite as quickly. Okay, so let's do this. We're going to draw a grid. Okay, so let's do the water test. That graph is not OCD approved. I apologize. Working around the camera and the microphone and everything else, that was harder to do than I thought. And so I'm going to have my very picky daughter draw the grid ahead of time next time. We'll do the water test. So that grid is dry. I allowed some time for that to dry, and this I'm going to leave just in the time it takes for me to move from one thing to the other, and we'll see kind of a combo here. That ink has just had a few seconds in the middle. Got my handy dandy, this is the syringe I used to fill things up, and I might have, okay. That gives you an idea. So some of that had been dry for a good bit. I paused the camera and everything and let that dry pretty well. So water fast, no. That's not really a surprise though. Not that water fast. And of course, the words water test had not completely dried. But if you look at these parts, this most assuredly, as thin as it was well dry. And so that gives you an idea there. Let me just kind of clean up my mess because I can feel a bigger mess coming on. Okay, so that gives you an idea on the water fastness of the Monteverde brown sugar. Went ahead and did a cotton swab while I was waiting for that to dry, so that gives you an idea of the shading and the ink overall. And now I'll tell you this, I really like this brown. I'm looking forward to testing some of the others, but I can tell you already, this is a great recommendation by those of you who recommended the Monteverde brown sugar. It is the shade it's just right in the area of brown that I wanted. Here, where it's pretty wet, it's quite dark. Writing a bit drier, you're going to end up here, so it's got a fair amount of shading depending on the pen that you're using. You're going to get maybe closer to this with some pens, and dark with that where it's very saturated and was quite wet. So that I like too, that variation. So yeah, this gets a major thumbs up from me. I really like this ink. So hope you've enjoyed that. Obviously, I got some bugs to work out in my test system just to make things go a little bit smoother. This first time was definitely the first time, you can tell, but that's okay. I appreciate so much the encouraging things that y'all have said, and has been learning how to do all of this myself with you watching. And before I close out, let me say one more thing. As of today, this is going out Friday evening, and next Tuesday is going to be the drawing for the Parker Vector. So I'll put a link right above here as I'm mentioning it. Go and make a comment on that post and enter into the drawing for the Parker Vector. It's a translucent blue. It's like a cobalt blue. Really nice little pen. And you can watch that video and see why I'm doing that. But God bless you, and I hope you got something good out of this. It's a little bit of a rough learning process for me. But God bless you, and have a great weekend.